This is St Andrews, South Brisbane. Please turn to chapter 2 of the second book of Kings, which you'll find on page 362 of the Church Bibles. Verse 1. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind. Okay, let's pause it right there. Am I the only person who thinks this is a remarkable thing to say as a seemingly throwaway line? We may very well sing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," particularly if you're an England rugby fan, but the chariot we sing about isn't literal. It's meant as a metaphor for life after death. But in Elijah's case, he didn't die, and that really does mark him apart. Even Jesus died. Think about that. There's only one other person in the Bible who comes close to Elijah's experience. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away, Genesis 5:24. But that isn't as clear-cut as in Elijah's case. Even less clear-cut is the Roman Catholic dogma of the Assumption of Mary, which is without any scriptural warrant. And yet, lest we get carried away, no pun intended, let us remember that whilst Elijah may have been a spiritual giant, he still got depressed and discouraged, and his ministry made only a dent in the spiritual deadness of his times. As James tells us, Elijah was a human being, even as we are. Elijah's imminent departure brings into view the topic of succession planning. This is not something you'd want to look to the British Conservative Party for guidance on. In this case, Elisha's apprenticeship had been for about 5 years. He'd been called by Elijah at the Lord's instruction back in 1 Kings 19. In my previous work, in newspapers and the like, and in my ministry, I've always been on the lookout to pass work on. The idea being that this frees me up to do something else. And that also applies to my departure. I always have in mind the proverbial bus, as in, what would happen if I were run over by a bus today? Would I leave things in order for others to pick up where I left off? What provision are we making for those who will come after us? We have the expression, to take up someone's mantle, meaning to inherit another person's dreams, goals, or responsibilities. That's derived from this passage, as Elisha takes up Elijah's cloak. I'm very glad for those who have nurtured and encouraged me. 3 clergy in particular come to mind, although there are others. Peter Lawrence, my vicar in Birmingham, Hal Davis, my vicar in Wolverhampton, and John Jones, my rector in Sydney. What role is God calling you to in this regard? I wonder if you've wondered where the saying, "live each day as if your last," comes from. I've managed to trace it back to the 2nd century Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. Thomas Ken, Bishop of Bath and Wells in the 17th century, wrote, "Redeem thy misspent time that's past, and live this day as if thy last. Improve thy talent with due care, for the great day thyself prepare." I wonder if you know which hymn that's from. Awake, my soul, and with the sun. The story goes that John Wesley was asked if he knew he were to die at midnight, how he would spend his final day. His reply was, "Why, madam, just as I intend to spend it now." We're given an insight into Elijah's last day on earth. He spends it visiting 3 groups of prophets. At Bethel, verse 3, Jericho, verse 5, and the Jordan, verse 7. I don't know if this is what Elijah had been intending to do anyway, but these groups of prophets probably form part of his succession plan as well, and it's likely he wanted to bid them a final farewell. The point is, he went about his God-appointed ministry right to the end. We are given a couple of details about these visits. 3 times, verses 2, 4, and 6, Elijah tells Elisha to stay here. And 3 times, Elisha replies, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." This reminds me of Jesus asking Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" in John chapter 21. When we're told something 3 times, it's the Bible's way of saying, this is important. The other curious detail is Elijah telling the Bethel and Jericho prophets to be quiet when they ask him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" The NIV Study Bible, my go-to reference, doesn't have anything to say about this, and neither do I, really. The best I can come up with is Elisha's basically saying, "Hush now, what will be, and there's nothing more to be said." Verse 8. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. Does this remind you of anything? What does it remind you of? Moses parting the Red Sea. Spot on. So Moses took his staff and was able to part the Red Sea, and the Israelites passed over, escaping from Egypt. Elijah can be seen as a Moses-like figure. It's significant that the 2 of them appear at Jesus' transfiguration, representing the Old Testament law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah. So here we have the Reredos at St Andrew's Cathedral in Sydney, and as is often the case with these things, we have Moses on this side and Elijah on this side. And interestingly, in the centre, we have the Transfiguration. Originally, it was a crucifixion scene, but Sydney, being Sydney, changed it back in 1887. Bit of ecclesiastical history for you there. Verse 9. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. Now here, the NIV Study Bible does have something to say. Elisha was using terms derived from inheritance law to express his desire to carry on Elijah's ministry. Inheritance law assigned a double portion of a father's possessions to his firstborn son. Elisha is saying to Elijah, "Let me be your son." Then comes the big event, except it happens almost as casually as it had first been mentioned in verse 1. As they were walking along and talking together, verse 11, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind, and that was that. There's no doubt, but Elijah has gone. He left his cloak behind, and the 50 prophets of Jericho who conducted a search for him found nothing. Verses 16 and 17. Elijah had told Elisha, verse 10, "If you see me when I am taken from you, the double portion of your spirit will be yours. Otherwise it will not." Elisha had indeed seen. Verse 12. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel." Then we get further confirmation. Verse 14 onwards. Elisha took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the Jordan River with it. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." Elijah may be seen as a Moses figure. Now, Elisha can be seen as a Joshua-like figure. Joshua had succeeded Moses. Elisha succeeds Elijah. Elisha crosses the Jordan as Joshua had done. The NIV Study Bible tells us Elisha and Joshua are very similar names. Elisha meaning God saves, and Joshua, the Lord saves. And of course, Joshua and Jesus are the same name. One is from Hebrew and the other from Greek. In our angels study yesterday, we looked at Isaiah's experience of seeing the Lord in the temple, as recorded in Isaiah chapter 6. We were asked what impact this would have had on him. My answer was that it would have made things real to him. Elisha's witnessing of Elijah being taken would have had a similar effect on him. Vision is the energy that creates action. It's the fire that motivates everything. Vision is a glimpse of reality, a glimpse of the future, a glimpse of what is possible, a glimpse of what produces a passion. It's the sort of glimpse that Elisha and we are given in the drama of verse 11 as Elijah is taken. God breaks in. Elisha needed that vision to keep him passionate in God's service. He needs to see and experience the transcendent, the reality of God at work, of God in control, of God all-powerful, of God for whom nothing is too difficult. Elijah's transfer, like Jesus' resurrection and ascension, reminds us surely, gloriously, that God is alive, that he is the living God, but eternity is his realm, but he breaks into history in sovereign power, that his presence makes a difference to everything. It's a reminder that whilst in the world we are living and operating on the very threshold of eternity, and it can break in on any of us at any moment. God's time to take Elijah was also his time to take Elisha onwards in service and commitment. Living this side of the cross and resurrection, we have the inestimable advantage of knowing about God's ultimate breaking in the life, death, resurrection and ascension of Jesus. And nothing can be the same again. In verse 14, Elisha asks, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The answer is, Elijah has gone, but his God has not. His God is with us. Amen.